Like as of now, like we are using the XP mission, right? So that is easily vulnerable. So can we do this for our latest missions also?
Latest machine, yeah, that you can do. But for the latest machine, let's say Windows 7 or Windows 10, thing is that you need to kind of, am I audible?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So thing is that you can also do in that part, but over there, the exploit technique will be very complicated. Okay, the reason for that is that there are different kind of protections. So one of the protection is like which I'm writing right now, it's called ASLR. ASLR means address space layout randomization, which we'll be kind of saying that because that is something which this kind of protection is actually turned off in the window XP, which I have kind of intentionally turned off in this one, which is ASLR. Then there is another protection called as DEP. DEP is called data execution prevention. And what I mean by data execution prevention is, if you recall, yesterday we were discussing about the Malfind plugin, where we were saying that okay, the pages has been kind of set with the permission executable, right? If you recall that we were discussing that the pages in the RAM memory, where the pages had read and write privilege, but we also said that privilege with executable. So what this DAP actually does is that it actually doesn't allow you to set this permission, the executable permission. It will not let you set any of the pages. So even if the attacker is able to kind of write their code in one of the memory pages, the DAP software, operating system security control, will not allow to set that page with executor permission. So that is what DAP actually does. It actually kind of protect. So even though, so what it does is like this kind of protections, they understand that okay, there will always be a vulnerability in the software, and maybe any of the vulnerability will lead to the whole compromise of the window operating system. In that case, what the window operating system or Linux operating system or Mac operating system, they all have this kind of protection like ASLR, DAP, and few more like Windows 10 has Emmet. So there are a few other techniques. Okay, but it is mostly like thing is that these are the protection by which it actually tries to protect your operating system, even though there is kind of something kind of, let's say, vulnerability in the software. Okay, so even if the attacker knows that there is a vulnerability, the attacker will not be will not be successful. So now to kind of do that, now to kind of evade this one ASLR and DAP, thing is that I had one practical for me where I specifically kind of successfully attacked a vulnerable software where the ASLR and DEP was actually turned on. So there are certain things that you need to kind of figure out. So for an example, let's say for the ASLR, which is address space layout randomization, what I mean to say is, let's say I go over here and when I was telling that, okay, over here that, okay, the memory range start from here, let's say 0B, FFFFF. What the address space layout randomization will do is that it will change this value randomly to a different value every time that software is run. Okay, so it will not be static. So the stack memory address will not be static. And what will happen is that because of that, the attacker will not be able to figure out what's the next address will be, and most of the exploit, at least 90 out of 100 exploit will not work, because of this address space of this memory, rather than always being static as BFFFF, is kind of changed to a certain different values every time the software is run. Okay, so there are different ways to kind of evade that. One of the way actually is that, let's say yesterday we were seeing that we were actually seeing a malware which was p.exe, right? P.exe was actually, as you have seen, that it was reading multiple DLL files internally, if you remember. Okay, multiple DLL files were reading. So now if this p.exe has ASLR protection enabled, and if it has certain kind of vulnerability, let's say we won't be able to kind of exploit that software, and we won't be able to get a remote control of the system just because p.exe has a vulnerability. Okay, so in that case, the other way to kind of evade that is like it actually becomes much more complex, which I have not planned for you guys to deliver because those are really complex topics. I have a lab. Maybe if time permits, I can give you a quick like go through that document and let you know. I have that actually now also. Maybe I can showcase that. after I explain the easy part. But thing is, that is definitely something at high level. Okay. So thing is that what we normally do is that in that case, this ASLR, actually, let's say it is reading a lot of DLL files. So we try to see if there's any kind of DLL file or any kind of file that this p.exe is reading, which doesn't have ASLR protection enabled. So you will see that for a lot of operating system, for a lot of software that is running, even though it has ASLR, the files that they are reading internally, like a DLL files or let's say any other file, at least 1 out of 100 file will definitely have ASLR turned off. Okay, and if you get at least one of them, your work is done. You can kind of then, rather than exploiting this p.exe directly, you can utilize. Actually there are a lot of things like chaining of commands and all, where you use that DLL to kind of get a remote controller system. So it's very complex topic. Maybe I can kind of give a brief introduction about that. But this is what you will be kind of dealing out when you are kind of dealing with a good operating system, let's say Windows 7 or Windows 10. In that case, the ASLR will be turned on by default. Okay, you can also turn it off. And same for dep. Dep is again actually, even though it's a very good protection, it is actually sometimes it is like with attacker mindset, you can actually kind of evade that to data execution prevention technique. And then there are other techniques like MX. So today we will be kind of focusing on the window XP part, because otherwise thing is that it's already quite complex, as you have seen earlier, and adding those all things again on top of that vulnerability, it will start making not much sense to you guys. Okay. So thing is that's why I'm keeping, even though it is complex, I'm keeping it a little bit kind of a easy to understand manner. That's why I have picked XP, just because I have turned this dep and ASLR protection off. Okay. But I have a document. I will go through that maybe once I'm done with this, where I will showcase you guys one of the exploit that I wrote earlier, or one of the MP3 software which works even when there is kind of like, let's say, the dep and ASLR is turned on. Okay. So with that in mind, any other questions before I proceed? Yeah, go on.
No, that's it, sir. Clear with me.
Okay, fine. So now the thing is that, let's say I am an attacker, and what I'm doing is that, let's say I am trying to kind of test it out if it has some kind of vulnerability. So what I will do, one of the things that I will do is that one of the common technique to find a vulnerability is buffer overflow attack. There are different kind of attacks like heap buffer flow or format string vulnerability attack, a lot of different kind of attack. But buffer overflow attack is one of the most common type of attack that is like kind of found in most of the software, and a lot of the real world software actually struggles to kind of stop this attack. Okay, so what I will do in the buffer overflow attack is that in the buffer overflow, as you mean overflow, that means the data that this software is expecting is I will kind of give it more data than it is expecting. So if I give this one, okay, so it was able to kind of, I think it was able to read that, it didn't broke out. But now what I will do is that I'll give it a use value, let's say a use value. So let me do one thing. A use value. So what I'm doing is I gave a big value, but it worked. Okay. Now I will give it a much more bigger value. Okay. So this time also it worked. Okay. So that means that thing is that so what is happening is that it is actually having a very big buffer actually, and even though I'm giving a big value, it is able to handle that. If that buffer value was low, it would have overflow at this point. So what I will do is that now what I will do, since NC is not allowing me to write a bigger text, so what I will do is that I will try to kind of interact with this tool in a different way, okay, rather than using NC. So what I am going to do is, let me do one thing. I will be doing something like this. I'll do Python